I think one of the things that I've really been thinking about over the last few months has been the similarity between our struggle and all the other struggles. There is something that I've heard both from Palestinians and from people outside about how this particular genocide is unique, how this particular genocide is unprecedented, how this genocide is unlike anything else. And there is, of course, some truth to that. There are elements of this genocide that are unlike anything else. But the more I think about it, the more I realize just how similar these genocides are. Founded in things like white supremacy, founded in things like settler colonialism, this genocide is just a continuation of the genocides that came before it. And so if we recognize that there's nothing truly unique or special about this particular genocide, then we can look at the lessons that have come from the people who have walked these paths before us. And as people who live in Canada, one of the things that we can look at is what our Indigenous brothers, sisters, and siblings have been saying and doing about their own genocide. I had been listening to an interview, it must have been several years ago, and one of the authors said something that didn't fully register with me at the time. He was talking about how good Indigenous people are at making post-apocalyptic science fiction. It was a really niche interview, I guess you could say, on some podcast I can't remember anymore. And he said the reason why we're so good is because we've already had our apocalypse. We've already lived our end times. It was when I went from Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis to Gaza City that his words rang through my head. That what he said finally landed and registered. Our people, the Palestinians, they have lived through the apocalypse. Maybe they're living through it still, but I think we're in the post-apocalyptic period now. They have seen the destruction of every single thing that they hold dear. Their society, their homes, their families, their culture, the things that they thought protected them, like the international community, international organizations, the United Nations. Somebody gave me some Mentos. I don't know how that'll go. And so, I want to paint you a picture of what I saw. We were an international medical organization. I just want you to frame that. We are literally the richest people in the entire Gaza Strip. We are the most privileged people in the entire Gaza Strip. And when we left from Khan Yunis to go to Gaza City, we had to cross this pathway that went by areas that have retaken their Israeli names. You see, when there is peace, the parts of Palestine have Palestinian names. And when there is war, they have Israeli names. And so most Palestinians had never heard of Zakim, had never heard of Josephine, had never heard of Netzarim. They only heard about them when the war came. They only heard about them when the apocalypse happened. And so we had to pass by Zakim. And the Israelis would bomb anything with a motor. So we, these internationals, these rich, these privileged, had to transfer onto donkey carts for these donkey carts to take us all the way across. And as we went, we saw these men sacrificing their lives in a different way. When the Israelis cut everything off, they cut everything off. And one of the things they cut off was petrol, diesel, gasoline, benzene, petrol, any oil products. How did the Palestinians respond? Well, did you know that if you melt plastic, you can make gasoline? Because I shouldn't. Until I saw these men with soot over their faces, with the most basic masks, pieces of torn cloth, burning this plastic so that they could make gas for their society to run and function and operate. To say that they lived in that post-apocalyptic moment is the most accurate statement that we can make. It is the most accurate thing that we can say. When these things happened, when society and the entire country broke down, what we were all told and what the Israelis believed was that the Palestinians would break down, that their cohesion would end, that they would turn on each other. That never happened. Instead, what happened was Palestinians came together, started sacrificing for each other. They became one in a kind of communal response that I have never seen before. I'll tell you from my perspective one of the direct examples of that. One of the most direct examples of that is the giving of life to other people. When the Israelis came, anytime the Israelis come and make contact with our people, they bring death and destruction. And when the Israelis came to Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis in February of 2024, they brought death and destruction. You've probably forgotten because there were so many atrocities ago. But they ran over people who were in the courtyard and buried them with their medical equipment, with their beds, with everything that they had. And one of the other things that the Israelis did is that they went in and burned and destroyed all of the medical equipment. And among them were the refrigerators that took care of the donated blood. And so the Palestinians had access to donated blood, but had no access to any means with which to preserve it, with any fridge or freezer or refrigerator. They literally would take whatever refrigerator they could find in people's homes and try to do their best to make that work. What did that mean in practical terms? It meant that almost every single day we ran out of blood, because you can't store blood except in these really high-level fridges. You can't store it for more than 24 hours. And every morning, people would come up on the minbars, these things that were set up so that people would hear the calls to prayer, and they would say, "Oh, people, we need blood. Donating blood is donating life and protecting your fellow citizens." And every single day the people came. Every single day, they would show up and donate blood. Yes, some for their families. Yes, some for their friends. But more people than I could really understand came to donate blood for people they had never heard of and might never see. And we would use those units. And when I would run out of blood in emergency, as happened every single shift that I worked over 3 months, I would step outside and ask somebody, "Are you in a position where you can donate blood?" And sometimes they would tell me, "I just donated yesterday," or "I just donated last week," or "I've donated 3 times in the last 2 weeks." But often, even when I knew that they didn't have that blood to give, they would say, "No problem." And they would go up and they would donate. These Palestinians came together in every conceivable way to assemble their society and to rebuild it. Shifa was raised and pillaged. What did they do as soon as they got back into it? What did the Palestinians do? They rebuilt it. Nasser, where I worked, was raised and pillaged. What did the Palestinians do? They rebuilt it. And when they see the bleeding of their institutions, they donate, they give, and they rebuild. And when they see that in their people, they donate, they give, and they rebuild. There is, however, a limit to how much Palestinians can give. For example, almost half of the units, about half of the time, half of the way through my trip there was the peak of the famine. Those of you who know me will know that I've lost a tremendous amount of weight because the famine spared no one. Spared no one at all. So about halfway through the famine, we started to get blood that was donated that was totally and completely useless. It was basically like water. Because at a certain point, you can't build without blood cells. You need protein, you need fat, you need sugars, you need amino acids, you need things to build blood. And we started to receive blood that was completely unusable, that looked like it was just water with food coloring. I was so puzzled to see this. And so I went up to the blood bank. I was upset at the blood bank. I thought that they were doing something wrong. And I wanted to know what they were doing wrong. And so I sat with one of the people. And I said to him, "What the hell is this?" And I threw a unit in front of him. And he's like, "That was the best unit we got yesterday, doctor. That was one of the best units we got yesterday. You don't even know how much you had to throw away. You don't even know how many we stopped as soon as we saw the blood start to flow through the IV tubes." The Palestinians have, in the literal sense, given every drop of blood that they can drink. And in the figurative sense, too. Almost every figure that we know who has led the Palestinians has at this point been assassinated. Almost every building has been destroyed. Almost everything is gone. At this point, they're doing the best they can, but it's not enough. We know that the resistance will be won or lost based on what Palestinians do. But that doesn't mean that there's no role for us. And so the question is, what do we do now? How do we step in? How do we contribute and make things better? Because it's not just literally that the blood has run out, it's also figuratively that the blood has run out. And so the Palestinians who are living in their post-apocalypse are in a situation where they don't have much more left to believe. And so the question for us is, what can we do more? How can we support them? When I was there, I donated blood, yes. And I remember just how exhausting it was. Literal blood donation, literal exhaustion. And how difficult it was to recover afterwards, because I was the same as everybody else. I wasn't receiving the nutrition that I needed so that I could build my blood cells back. In Canada, when I donate blood, it's a day that I don't feel well, maybe 2. In Gaza, it was weeks. Weeks. And when I would ask the other doctors how they knew when it was appropriate to donate blood again, I actually asked Canadian doctors about this, and they said 8 weeks. when I asked the Canadian doctor or the Palestinian doctors, they said, well, Tarek, as soon as you don't feel tired, it's time to donate again. They were donating every 2 to 3 weeks. And I'm incredibly ashamed to say there was no way I could match that pace. There was just no way. I didn't have it in me. I know that you're here to support a lot of the work that we do. And so we call on you to donate as much as you can until it hurts. And then, when you recover, to do it again. Yes, to Glia, but to other places too. What is it that we're doing out there? Because I think any of the people here, and I see, Dr. Yupeng, who's been to Gaza, and others who have lots of experiences with Gaza, Glia operates just differently from everywhere else. Because one of the keys that we have, one of the things that we do in our post-apocalypse is we try to match the energy of the Palestinian resistance in all of its forms. And so, for example, when the Palestinians look at plastic and say, hey, we think we can make diesel out of this, we see that as a challenge to us. And the Palestinians have come to trust us tremendously. They know that it's not just our medicine that's good, but our politics are good too. That's something that really does distinguish us from most other organizations. Many other organizations look at this with a disaster or humanitarian paradigm, and that's something that we don't do. We look at this from a white supremacist or settler colonialist paradigm. We know what fights we have to fight. But it's no good to fight the political fights if we don't also fight the humanitarian fights. And that's why we open clinics, so that we can take care of people on the ground. That's why we send in doctors. Even though I've been there for 3 months, I treated how many people? A few thousand? In a week, maybe 5 or 6 or 7 times more people than that are injured than any one of us could treat in those 3 months. And one of the projects, which I think we can probably announce publicly today that we've been talking about internally for a while, has been a project for external fixation. So, if many of you have had either broken bones yourself or friends who've had broken bones, when those bones break, you get a cast. But if there's an explosion that shatters your bones, a cast won't do. You need what's called an external fixator. Those are the pieces of metal that hang on the outside with needles, screws that go into the inside, connecting that so it stays straight. The Israelis have prevented their entry for months, almost 6 months. And I realized that there was a huge problem, that we were totally out, when patients, not just 1 or 2, but many started coming in and saying, Doctor, do you have any patients who have died who had hardware on them, these external fixators? When our patients would die with external fixators, we knew the deal. We took out the screws to be reused. These are not reusable screws, of course. And we took out the rods and the hardware, we set them aside and sent them back to the operating room to be re-sterilized and reused. And we had now come to a point where there was such a shortage that patients were going to the morgues and asking for this hardware. And so we looked for a solution, ended up finding that you could 3D print this really novel design that was pioneered in a university in the UK, and start putting it on. And in collaboration with hospitals in Gaza, we put on our first external fixators on patients in Gaza that were made 100% inside Gaza. Palestinians bring everything that they can to the table. And as an organization, we try to do the same thing. That's what we're asking everybody who's involved in this struggle today. I want to talk to you and to close by talking about some of the importance of what it is that we're doing and what these shortages need in a real and practical sense. You see here Farah sitting in front of me. She's a 1.5 old. And I saw a boy who was born just, I think it was about a month apart from her birthday, who had arrived to our hospital after a tent massacre. Our days were structured by massacres. At Fajr, we started to receive the aid massacres, people who had gone looking for food and would get shot. At Dhuhr, we started to get the delayed aid massacres, the people who got pinned down by fire and nobody could get them until the Israelis let up. And then at around Maghrib, we started to get the tent massacre. Of course, there were little kids, even in the aid massacres. Sometimes people would be there, think that they were far or safe, or they had been there first time, and they might be carrying their kids because there was nobody to take care of them. But the kids really started showing up when the tent massacres began. When people are in their home and a bomb hits, shrapnel gets intercepted by walls. When they're in tents, everybody within a 200-meter radius could be killed by one piece of shrapnel that hits in the wrong spot. Nobody who lives in a tent right now hasn't had shrapnel near them. Nobody. Not one person who lives in those tents. But every day we'd see the unlucky ones, the ones who were hit, some of them in the head. So we would sit there and have to explain to their parents how they were going to die. Some of them in the chest, some of them in the abdomen. No! And this one boy came in, and some woman had brought him in, and I assumed she was his mother. And so I asked her, what's his name? I asked her, what is his name? She says, I don't know. Well, I got frustrated. Well, what do you mean you don't know? She said, well, I was going by the area, and there was a bombing, and I ran to see how I could help, and I realized this whole family is dead. And this boy was the lone survivor in his tent. So I picked him up and I brought him to the hospital. And this boy was sitting there in front of us. He was already pale, blood draining from him. I put my ultrasound on him so I could see where this blood was going. He had just a small little hole in his tummy. And I saw that his tummy was full of blood, just packed. I already knew that we had no blood to give him. And this woman needed to be by his side. Usually we would ask the family to go donate blood. And so I went outside and I asked for a few of the shabab, a few of the young men to go donate blood. And they just took off to donate their blood. One of them was bound to be a match. And even if they weren't, we were probably going to still try to get the blood anyway, figure it out. This boy sat in front of us with his blood draining out into his belly, looking at us. And we started to think, what do we do now? Can we get him to the operating room? Should we give him blood? What do we do now? And as I sat there, he was lying on the floor, on this cold floor, because we had no beds. I sat there with this medical team, and we had a little scrum that we knew could only last 30 seconds, because of course there were so many other people who were dying. Should we operate on him? Should we give him blood? Should we treat him? Whose blood are we going to give him? How much blood do we need to give him? He was 1.5 years old. But we were going to have to give him 4, 5, 6 units? Who's going to operate on him? How long was that surgery going to take? And after he was done, who's going to feed him? Who's going to take care of his wounds?
Grandma shark did it. Grandma shark did it.
Logically,
Press the bell. Do boss baby Kabbalah.
we made the right
Do
decision.
boss baby TikTok. Husband. Let me put the boss baby.
We watched this little boy die in front of us on the floor. No blood, no surgery, no recovery, no further resources expended. It was only after he died that I remembered that he wasn't a resource problem. But he wasn't about
Yellow button.
of equations.
Blue button. And then blue button, red button. Red buttons and blue buttons. Your red blue button is the turtle.
It was only after he died and there was something in me that broke. The nurse who was with me picked him up and held him when he didn't care if she picked him up and held him. In death, he was more human to us in that treatment room than he was in life. And we took him to that morgue. We laid him on this bed beside at least a half dozen other kids as small as him.
Do boss baby Kabbalah. Boss baby Kabbalah right. Boss baby
After that,
Kabbalah.
for probably the next 2 weeks, even while I was working, I would just break down and cry. I wasn't necessarily thinking of him, but I would just break down and cry. My Palestinian patients, my Palestinian colleagues, all of them came and supported me. They never said anything. They never said, this doctor is, I don't want to treat me. because they felt the same things. They had been there way before I had been. And those who had given me advice before had told me, just let it out. Don't ever hesitate. This is a different war. It's different from the other ones we've served in together. If, when Palestine is dead, the whole world will remember its humanity. And shame on those people who will only humanize them when it doesn't matter. Shame on those people who will hug the corpse of our country and our people. Shame on them. You are all here because you are not those people. I know every last one of you is doing the most that you can. I know it. And I know, having been there, that this little child of ours, this baby country, is a beautiful thing. It may or may not survive. But our obligation today, tomorrow, and every other day is to do everything we can and to see it and to feel it before it dies. Thank you so much for letting me process in public, share with you. Thank you so much, Jafer, who gave the mentors to the girls. They'll be flying all night, I'm sure. And thank you so much for being there for Palestine, for being, the good people who are going to do everything that you can to make sure that this thing wins.